Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. For anyone who has experimented with plant medicines and psychedelics, you know exactly what I mean when I state that these experiences can be delivered with their fair share of challenges. For many newbies, this is what they fail to recognize, and ultimately why they end up allowing a challenging experience to be cast as a quote-unquote bad experience. When people ask me for tips on how they can come to view these challenges as positive rather than negative, no subject comes to mind and heart quicker than that of mind and body regulation. Having the understanding of how to control your breath, nervous system response, and subsequent thoughts stemming from our nervous system response has been, speaking for myself, the most beneficial way to shape my own meaning out of my plant medicine ceremonies, regardless of what I may experience during the ceremony. As many of you have heard me say before, I created this platform to not only discuss experiences, but to also bring on leading experts in their respective fields to discuss ways in which one can, quote unquote, do the work beforehand to ensure that they are set up for success in discerning whether or not these medicines are right for them in their lives. And the gentleman I am fortunate enough to be speaking with today is a shining example of this form of mastery. He is a world-renowned Wim Hof certified instructor, in which he guides people from all over the country and world in taking the term autonomy from a noun to a verb in his heart-centered live workshops. He is also a highly skilled CHEK practitioner, from which he has developed a deep understanding of the human mind, body, and spirit, and is a world-class yoga instructor, in which he allows people to experience what yoga truly stands for, which is the union of mind, body, and spirit. So, with all of that being stated, it is with my deep excitement and love that I welcome my man Yury Opendik to the show. Yuri, what's up, bro? Round two. Let's do it.
Hey, Ryan. Thank you for the beautiful intro. I hope to live up.
Yes. I have all the faith in the world in you, my man.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me on your show, brother.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You know, for anyone listening, I'm not sure what show will come out first, but we just rocked a highly optimized episode. And I love doing double headers, man, because especially for you and I and the connection we create, you know, in doing the episode, we get such a great look at your overall journey. You know, we went deep into, you know, Wim Hof and his impact on your life and, you know, what you've been able to do, self-healing, all these things. And now we're going to jump further down the rabbit hole, right? We're going to take it a step further where we start talking about the plant medicine experiences you've had, the awarenesses that have been gained, you know, how you've integrated those, and really anywhere else the divine wills this conversation to go. And so, you know, I'd love if you could explain to us the first psychedelic or plant medicine experience you ever had. And if that was the one that changed your life, or if it was a subsequent one that really opened the door. You know, for some people, it's their first one that was like, whoa, I definitely did not know what I didn't know. For others, it takes a couple times. So I'm curious for you, like, what was that like? Did the first one really blow the doors off, or did it take a little bit of time to have that result?
For me, it was my second experience. It was my first experience was with this one medicine man, and I don't think I really got it that time. I think I'm kind of like thick skin, and I really need like the full dose, so to speak.
Yes.
And so I experienced that on my second journey, and that's when I was like, so this is what it is.
Yeah.
It was like that.
Yeah.
That was my second journey for sure. And that was the doorway.
That's amazing, man. And, you know, I'm curious for you, you know, we're just going to dive right in here. You know, this is what I get so excited about. You referred to it as it, right? Like, oh, this is what it's all about, right? And I'd like to expand on that it. What do you think is going on? Like, what do you think plant medicines really illuminate for us? And I know I'm opening a deep rabbit hole here and we can take it wherever, but I'm curious for you, like when you experienced that it for the first time, I imagine that when you were in it, it was more of just having the experience. But when you came out of it, maybe you had thoughts about it, stories about like, oh, maybe this connects to this philosophy or that. I'm curious for you, like, what was that that you experienced?
Ooh, well, it was a while. It was quite a while ago, but from what I recall, for me, that it was a scary place at that time because it was uncharted territory. It was nothing like I've ever experienced before, and it was seeing other realms, maybe even other entities, and that was was quite scary for me. As I remember my first time, but I certainly felt the connection, the connection to the source. It was just the beginning. It really took years, many years to understand how the medicine works. And if I'm just gonna tell you what I felt that first time or that second time to what I kind of grew or got from it is absolutely different things, right? It really took many years of going deep into my deepest fears of so much, right? Of dealing with myself and my old belief systems, and I'm sure we're gonna get into it. And Ryan, just so much stuff is coming up right now. I'm just gonna let it breathe into it a little bit and
I knew
let
it
it
was a
flow
deep
out.
rabbit
But
hole.
yeah, yeah. I mean, because for me, this is what really helped me probably the most to transform my life because I came from kind of a little tough. I would say tough childhood. I was going through immigration and traveling through with my dad. My parents got divorced, and I was 10 years old when we came to the United States, and so I was kind of finding my own way. My dad was finding his own way. He was trying to make it here, and he was busy doing himself and learning the language and becoming an engineer here in the States. And so I had to kind of hustle and then grow up, find my own way, and had all kinds of jobs. By the time I was 18, I've been working since I was 10. So I grew a lot of these complexes and walls and all sorts of things that I didn't know that I had until I started working with this medicine. And it took years, many years of really recognizing all those issues that I had, with connecting, to myself and to other people.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's a good start.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And what it brings up for me is when I first had my experience of that honestly, I was around 23. So at that time, I was definitely, I'd been interacting with cannabis for years and I had definitely had some mystical experiences there. But at that point, I was abusing cannabis. I had no idea what it really was or how it really worked. I remember my friends and we would interact with, say, psilocybin or something. And, we'd do a lot of the quote unquote right things, right? We'd have the right set and setting. We'd put music on, yada, yada. But I remember a couple times where, we took heavier doses and all of us were kind of just pretty confused of what was happening, right? Like, we knew we experienced something unbelievable, but we just had no context of where to put it, right? At this point, I hadn't started my quote unquote spiritual journey, if you want to put a blanket term on it. And, looking back, and especially now when I interact with plant medicines, what I believe anyway, right? And again, there's no way to really quantifiably prove this, but from the people I've listened to, from the experiences I've had, and also joining the modern mystery school and being initiated into that lineage, which has been huge for me and really like giving me an immense amount of awareness on what we were even doing in this earth school, right? What is our purpose of like being alive? Like, what is the potential of us being here? And so for me, what I now notice, and I imagine this is why so many people have challenges with plant medicines, is because they don't have this awareness beforehand that I'm going to state here, which is plant medicines a lot of times, if the goal, quote unquote, right, of life, right, the reason that we're reincarnated over and over again in this cycle of birth and death from the physical plane is to live out karma, which is our lessons, which are essentially, when you break that down, at least how I look at it, is like Our karma, our lessons are the parts of us that we have yet to claim into our wholeness, right? We have yet to claim as part of us. And so an example could be maybe you see someone that aggravates you, right? But you don't notice that that person is being presented to you as an opportunity for you to see it in yourself so that you can reclaim it and go, yeah, there's a part of me that wants to be the person that's narcissistic or the person that does X, Y, Z, right? And I know that I have that full potential and I'm consciously choosing to be here, right? To not play into those tendencies, but I can see that I can have compassion for it. And so I think the things that get illuminated a lot in our plant medicine journeys are our shadows, right? And shadows get shadow work, this whole terminology gets thrown around a lot and it gets a pretty negative connotation. It's basically like, when I first heard the term shadow work, I'm like, oh, working on all the fears that I have and things like that. But I didn't understand the context. It's like, well, yes, there are going to be some fears in there, right? But honestly, none of them are actually real. They're just perceptions. And that's why they're in the shadow, because you're afraid to look at them. But also, a lot of those aspects of the quote unquote shadow are actually the highest amount of divinity that you're yet to embody. And so maybe, let's have a scenario where someone was, abused as a child and they've pushed that away. And that's part of their shadow. And then going through this experience, they accept that and they reclaim it into their wholeness. Now they're able to connect with so many other people who share a similar journey and say, hey, I know exactly what that feels like. Whether or not they ever come out, quote unquote, the other side and they're like, I'm cured. More of like, I know what this feels like and I can relate to you. So that other person no longer feels alone in the world. And so that's what I mean when I say a lot of these aspects of our shadow, so I've found, are actually like our most divine aspects of our life that we've yet to embody. What's up, ladies and gents? I wanted to take a second while I had your ear to share with all of you a very important announcement. Now, anyone who's been listening to the show for some time now knows that I am passionate about coaching and helping other coaches up-level their coaching practice. What I have noticed in working with hundreds of coaches is that coaches of all different types are facing challenges with being able to get their clients strong and consistent results, understand where to put their energy to allow their practices to thrive, stand out in the vast sea of coaches, move from imposter syndrome into trusting themselves, and ultimately make the money necessary to be financially independent in their coaching practice. The root of these issues comes down to a lack of connection with your creative force as a coach and entrepreneur. Now, this is why we at Highly Optimized have created the Connect with Cannabis 10-week coaching certification program. The reason that cannabis is the focus of our program is because cannabis acts as an imagination medicine. And in order to break free of these challenges, you must first be able to imagine yourself as the coach that is successful and has been able to break free of these challenges. When you are able to truly imagine and connect with the most powerful version of yourself, you can find the clarity to build your business, your authentic voice to speak directly to your clients, and the faith that you can overcome everything standing in your way. Once you have experienced and learned how to achieve these results for yourself, you will be able to offer this same unique skill set in your coaching practice to support your clients in overcoming their limiting beliefs and allow them to experience the breakthrough results that will make you stand out as a world-class coach. In this program, you will learn the science behind cannabis, how to experience the healing powers of cannabis, and how to facilitate these healing powers with your clients. With personalized one-on-one support on how to apply these frameworks into your business and weekly group calls within a community of coaches just like you will be equipped with a unique skill set that will allow you to get consistent, powerful results with your clients, feel confident in your coaching abilities, and allow you to gain financial independence while having the opportunity to wake up each day excited to share your important work with the world. For anyone listening who is hearing the call to set yourself apart and develop a unique set of coaching skills not found anywhere else in the world, jump over to the link on our Instagram bio and book a complimentary call with me today. Together, we will go over your current challenges in your business, your goals for your business, and decide together whether you qualify for a seat in the program. The next class begins February 9th, and spots are filling up quickly to be a part of the budding movement that is cannabis coaching. So book your call today and position yourself as a leading voice of how to work with this sacred plant medicine in your practice. Thank you all for your continued support, and as always, enjoy the show. For me, it's been a cyclical process of going in, and essentially what I think of psychedelics is throwing chum in the water. And what I mean by that is, if you're out looking for sharks, I don't know who's out there looking for sharks, but if you are looking for sharks, you can throw chum into the water. And if you think there's no sharks, there will soon be sharks there. And so what I do is, if I start noticing some challenges in my life, maybe I'm getting, triggered over something my girlfriend's saying, maybe I'm, frustrated with business or something. And I start to notice, okay, there's something here and I'm unaware of what it is right now. In my sober state, my ego, all my protector patterns are up. They're preventing me from seeing this thing that's quote unquote painful. And so when I go into a plant medicine ceremony, I'm looking for a gained awareness, illumination of what's in that shadow, right? To literally throw a flashlight on it. And then what happens is then I'm able to actually take that and gain awareness. And that's not where it ends. I'm not just like, oh, I gained the awareness, now I'm cured, right? It then goes into the actual integration, which is realizing it, right? Like making it real for you and your experience of life and going, okay, now I know that my pattern, let's say, as an example, I love throwing out analogies and examples, is like, oh, I've been waking up late because I'm self-sabotaging myself. Maybe this is what you end up realizing is like, oh, I've wanted to start my own business, but I'm going to bed too late and getting up too late. And I'm self-sabotaging myself by saying, oh, I don't have any time. When really I'm staying up too late on Instagram, scrolling and doing things that really aren't like dedicated to my mission. And so you have that awareness, but now when you come back into your daily life, it's like, okay, what changes are you going to make to integrate that change? Okay, I'm going to go to bed by this time every night. I'm going to devote myself to that. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to have a morning routine. And that starts the integrated process where now you can actually take what was illuminated and reclaim it into your wholeness. And so I think that's like, for me, what I've, at this point anyway, what I imagine is going on, at least with what's being illuminated and kind of what the purpose of that being illuminated is.
Yes. I totally feel what you're saying. It definitely puts things, put a spotlight on all those things that were kind of either been sweeping under the rug, so to speak, or not aware that they're there. And the medicine just amplifies it and allows it for you to see, right? So, and once you see, that's when the work actually begins, right? So then you can then begin to work with whatever the task came up, and instead of rejecting it or saying that I'm great, everything is perfect, and I'm good.
Yeah.
You're able to like, oh shit, I got some things that I need to work through, and how can I do that, right? And it's a process of getting in touch with yourself, with your feelings, and accepting yourself. We've all made mistakes in our lives, and for me, it had a lot to do with forgiving myself with making those mistakes and really, feeling whole. That's where it all was leading up to, is to stop becoming and to be, right, to feel whole and to begin to love myself, accept myself. And I'm not saying that I love myself all the time. I fall into the trap and I have doubts and all that jazz. It's always there. It comes up. But the awareness, right? The awareness, it gets raised, and I'm able to see it more clearly, more often, and work through it, right? Instead of hiding from it, or from myself, or from my shadows. And all of it is there. It is there, and most of it I see it, but I'm sure there's a lot more that I need to see. Yeah, I think it's going to be like that all my whole life. I'm not ever going to get anywhere. It's just a journey and a process of growth, right, and development, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, all of that.
Yeah, dude. It's so true. At least from what I've experienced in the plant medicine space, and one of the things I constantly remind myself, because I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist, right? And so what I remind myself is that I am a process, not an outcome. Right. Because I imagine there's two sides to this that I see, right? There's the side where like, I didn't know what I was going to see and I wasn't really prepared for it, AKA bad experience, or like, I'm so ready to make the changes and see what I need to see, but I'm not patient enough to let them integrate in the way they need to. And I think that's almost the side that I fall more on these days. And what I, keep a keen awareness on is that I'll have a plant medicine experience and maybe I have this awareness gained, right? And then I'm almost like, I want the change now. I want it immediately. And I'm willing to put in the work for it, but I want it yesterday. Right. And that's been one of the challenges for me, is realizing like, hey, everything's going to come in due time, more of that feminine energy, right? Like in those types of moments, I realize like, okay, my masculine is looking to take action, and that's great, right? Like love that part of myself, and also realize like, hey, a lot of times what my masculine energy will tell me is like, you'll be safe, you'll be good, you'll be able to love yourself when XYZ happens. And that's why it's like, I want it done now, because I want to be able to love myself. I want to be able to accept myself, versus the feminine energy, which is you're perfect the way you are and you can always get better. So love yourself fully for who you are, and love yourself even more for the ability and the notion that you want to change, right? That you're yearning for a deeper connection to yourself, to others, etc., and focus on that. And then what that gives way to is that when we're able to tune into our feminine energy first, we're able to get the inspiration for then our masculine to take action. But I think what a lot of people do is they wake up, and I think we talked about this a little bit with discipline in the other episode, where, you know, people wake up and especially men, right? They just go, but they don't really know what their why is, why they're doing all this stuff. And I think for me, really being able to understand why I interact with plant medicines, why I do self-development, why I do any of this stuff, which is, hey, look, I'm just looking to be of service in the best way I possibly can. And I'm also looking to love myself and have the best experience of life humanly possible. And I would say spiritually possible too, right? And so for me, now when I go into an experience, it's like, I'm ready to see what I'm ready to see. You know, I'm looking for exactly the right dose of like awareness, where it's like, okay, that's actionable, but it's not so much that like, it's almost like it puts me in that fear state of, whoa, there was way more than I thought. And I think that's why, you know, dosing not only the amount that you're looking for in terms of development and like awareness, but also the amount, right, that you're doing of said medicine is so important. And, you know, what you said in the beginning, that, you know, you're someone who it sometimes takes a full dose, and I'm very similar. It's funny because very similar to what we were talking about with ice baths. Like I still get nervous every time before I take a psychedelic and interact with it. And I think that's honestly like, I've thought about that. I'm like, I feel like that's a good thing, right? Because if my ego was too entrenched in it, I imagine it would be like, we got this, right? And I've gone into experiences with that type of energy and gotten backhanded pretty good. But I'm always a little nervous because I know like, hey, I'm going to be doing a higher dose. I know my ego is going to go through like a big challenge of like, what are you doing up there? You know, like what's going on? And so I'm curious for you, like, you know, when you're doing these, you know, larger doses, right? And I'm not talking anything insane, but just the dose that's going to get you to break through. What are some of the, you know, statements, conversations, you know, pieces of advice, tips, anything in that category that you tell yourself as you're moving in and transcending from sober state of reality into altered state, that allow every part of your being, ego included, to be like, okay, yeah, we can handle this. We're safe. Let's go. What are some of those things that you tell yourself? Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
So I can, I resonate, you know, I get nervous pretty much about before every single experience, because I know what I'm going to be going through. And, you know, when I'm talking about the medicine, I'm talking specifically about ayahuasca. That's the medicine that I primarily have been working with for the last 15 years. And so I know what I'm going to be going through initially, right? And so there's going to be that initial taking the medicine, which is by smell and taste, is, you know, I don't know if you work with this, but it is pretty harsh after you've done it
Yes.
once.
Yes.
And so it will take you through that integration space where you're kind of going from normal state into another state of consciousness. And that transition is usually a little rough. Like you may experience some nauseousness, and it's this process, right? That I pretty much every single time is the same, and so there is kind of some nervousness around that, and it can be, sometimes it can be light or it can be really intense. And so when it gets intense, when when it gets intense for me, I know that the backbone, my roots, is my breath, and I always know that this is what I have, and I need to breathe, right? So you may have a purge come on, which is great, awesome, or you may not, and all you can never really go back to is my breath. So I always remind myself that this is temporary, because sometimes the divisions can get really, really on and crazy, and it could be so dark that you not only can see anything with your eyes open. Yeah, it can get intense. So the breath is what I remind myself that that's all I have, and to just slow down the breathe. The breathing is nasal breathing in through the nose, slowly out through the mouth. It works. It works. It's not instantaneous. It's not flip of the switch. It may take 10, 15 minutes. It may take an hour. But if you stick to it, if you relax your nervous system. So in those situations, right, there's two choices, really, for me. Either go into panic mode and try to go into this purging heave, try to get rid of all of this stuff that's coming up, all of this anxiety and fear and whatever else it may come up, or I may just sit still, sit up, and use my breath to calm down my nervous system. And calming down my nervous system through the breath is what works for me every single time. Every single time.
Yeah, it's such powerful and potent advice too, because, what I've noticed is that when I'm going through a challenging experience, it's not like I can just meditate in the same way and repeat a mantra, because a lot of times there's a lot of stuff going on. So what my mantra becomes is my breath, where it's like, it not only is like, activating the parasympathetic system and allowing you to like, rest and calm down, but it's also for me providing my mind that might be focusing on a lot of the challenges coming up. It allows it to have a focal point, right? Like some of that ujjayi breathing, where you're breathing in like the ocean and out through like the ocean, like the waves and like the tides. And, for me, that style has been so powerful. And, what you realize in that is that, yeah, like breath really is a gas pedal and brake pedal, right? Like, how you're breathing. That's like when I was talking about this with my business partner, Alex, and we were talking about how one of the best things about plant medicines is that it takes a lot of far out concepts and makes them real. So like, for instance, we hear about the heart chakra, but yet like in our left brain dominant society, we can't literally see the heart chakra. So it's hard for us to sometimes believe it exists, right? The great thing about plant medicines is that you just know it exists. You can feel it, right? And it's just there. And that's like where, for me, as someone who was in my left brain predominantly, for most of my life, I always believed in, we can call it supernatural things, et cetera, but it was hard for me to like have the experience of it. But, for breath, for instance, I really understood what breath work did when I did it for the first time on plant medicines, when I was interacting with plant medicines, because then I was able to feel, because I was way more in my body. I was able to feel my heart slow down. I was able to feel my thoughts settle. I was able to feel into these things and then go, whoa, there's a lot going on here. And on the other side of it too, we touched on this too in the other episode, but we can dive into it a little deeper now, is, if you blast some Wim Hof breath when you're interacting with a psychedelic, I mean, be prepared for that experience, because it can be jarring. I remember there was a time where, that same DMT breathing style, just 10 quick breaths, hold, squeeze. My girlfriend and I, we were sitting with a shaman, and we did a heroic dose of mushrooms, which it's still a weird connotation to call it a heroic dose, but 5 grams of mushrooms. And we had recently sat with 5-MeO DMT. And so I don't know, I've heard some information on this. I don't have again, someone can fact check this, but what I've heard is that if you interact with that medicine, whatever medicine you interact with in a 3-month span after that is going to be a little bit accentuated, a little bit stronger. And so we didn't think about this. We ended up just, it was about a month later. We didn't really think anything of it. And so we sit with these mushrooms and we get blasted. I mean, like, I was having an absolute blast. Both of us were having fun, but I could tell she went a little bit farther out and as a different direction than I did. And so she was a little like, just looking for an anchor. Okay, this is all good. Okay, I'm starting to figure out this new place. And I was definitely there too. But, my higher self, the mushrooms, whatever you call them, were guiding me a little bit more. She was kind of just there, like, choose your own adventure. And I was more like getting guided through. I was crying, sobbing, heaving, going through a bunch of stuff. And after I had worked through like the first big hour and a half long of like challenge, crying and breaking through the story that I couldn't cry, I mean, all this amazing stuff, I was feeling really empowered. And so I go sit on the ground, I do some hape, and then I'm like, hey, I'm going to do a round of breath work. And I look at her, I'm like, do you want to do it? And she's like, no. I'm like, okay, perfect. So I sit there and I'm like, this is going to be amazing. And I do quick 10 breaths. And I shit you not, I had a samadhi experience where legitimately I became nothing. I whited out completely. And this is probably like a 5-second span. It was, I know it was quick, but it felt like forever, where I literally disappeared. And I felt like I was turned into pure awareness, and I get launched back into my body and my heart is pounding. And I'm just like, okay, that was a lot. Like I had no idea how strong that was going to be. So for anyone listening, make sure you're ready for that before you start experimenting. But the great thing about the breath work that you're talking about is that it's very safe to interact with psychedelics and do a parasympathetic box breathing style. And it really feels like pure euphoria, right? Because again, you're calming your system down. You're entering into like an ecstatic state of being, and you're not going to necessarily launch yourself farther out, which I think is really important to make a note on.
Did you pass out, Ryan?
No, I was... I was sitting up, I was on a cushion, sitting crisscross applesauce, and it literally must have been between 3 and 5 seconds, because it wasn't that long overall. I could feel it, but I legitimately had no idea who I was, what anything, like literally I deleted my entire being, like straight up, whited out, and then came back and was sitting in the same, hadn't moved at all. And again, I'm guessing it was around 5 seconds. But I hadn't moved at all. And I was perplexed because I knew that I had no control over anything when I was gone. I didn't know if I was going to come back and have pissed myself. Who knows, right? But I knew that like I just literally deleted myself out of existence and then re-uploaded myself back in. It was pretty wild.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah. It's pretty funny, man. And looking back on it, it was a very interesting experience, and I'm very grateful I had it. But now I don't tell people not to do it by any means, because I don't think anything is right or wrong, but just be ready for that before you go ahead. Like I hit the button without knowing. For everyone else, tons of other people have done this, but for anyone listening, I hit that button. If you're looking to hit that button, just make sure you're prepared for what might happen, because it can be 100x more intense than what you're going through at the time in your journey.
Yes, it can, for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, like if you're someone who you're on a certain dose and you're looking to excel that or like accelerate it, it might be something worth exploring. But I would say if you're like at the point where you're like, this is plenty, definitely don't interact with that, because it'll definitely add a whole new layer to it that you just might not be ready to integrate afterward.
Yes. And be safe. If you're going to be doing it sitting up, make sure that there are no hard objects next to you, because you can pass out, right? So you were sitting in a cushion and you were in a comfortable, your back was being held up, right? But if you were, let's say, sitting in a meditation pillow, you could have passed out, right? And so you could hit your head possibly on something. So be mindful of that. And I always say that even in my Wim Hof method workshops, because you can pass out just from the breathwork without any psychedelics. So that's how powerful it can be. And people can pass out, they have. So yeah.
Safety. There's some interesting experiences. This is going to be like a really weird rabbit hole to open up, but my buddy Eddie, who runs Ice and Iron, he had an experience with simply breath work. He was facilitating for another person, and he was essentially sherping them, which is, I imagine, what you do. You go there with them, right? So you're doing the breath work, and they were sitting on some bar stools at like his house or whatever. And they did like a pretty easy like round of Wim Hof. It wasn't like anything where you were really going for it, right? Like what I imagine like the 5th round is. It was just like a very light, but I imagine this, and I've never cross-checked this, but I know certain days it's like I blast off way harder than other days. Like some days I'll squeeze and I almost get nothing. Like I'll get like a nice like feeling, but then there'll be days where I squeeze for like literally half a second, and I feel like, ooh, I might pass out, like straight up, right? And so I don't know what's going on there, but basically this is what happened to Eddie. And he passed out, fell down, and as he was falling, all he could picture in his mind was the picture of a toaster, right? Like a straight up toaster. And he was just like, we were laughing our asses off about it. He's like, I have no idea what program my mind just like clicked on, but all I could see, like my anchor that was guiding me as I was falling, was just this picture of a toaster. And so for everyone listening, yeah, this stuff can get definitely weird for sure, just with breathwork alone. I mean, breathwork really is a psychedelic.
Wow. And he was okay, yeah?
Yeah, he ended up being fine. He like his I think his leg broke his fall or something, and he was fine. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting experience, you know. And I've had times where, you know, I've been sitting down, you know, I've come close where like I blast off and I can start to feel as soon as I'm blasting off, like, oop, I got to position my hands certain ways. I'm gonna lay back, you know. But yeah, I prefer doing breath work laying down, because then I just know I'm safe. And like the worst that will happen is, you know, I'll accidentally kick someone that's next to me if my legs flail or something like that. But I know I'm not going to fall over and hit my head, you know. So that's how I prefer doing it too.
Yes, that's great advice. Laying down is the safest way, and especially with these holotropic type of overbreathing techniques, like Wim Hof method. The best position is laying down. That's when you're 100% relaxed. You're not exerting any energy to hold yourself up. That's when you're able to let go the most. But if you're doing, you know, other breathing techniques like pranayama techniques with bandhas, you know, some of them are really good to do sitting up. They also induce you, you know, losing your consciousness and kind of whiting out. So if in those situations, just, you know, making sure you're sitting in a safe space. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. You know, it's so important, right? Like a big part of this podcast is harm reduction, right? And so I love that we're talking about this, because breath work, psychedelics, they're all becoming more popular at a very fast rate, and that's fantastic, right? But a lot of times what happens when something's been demonized for so long, like psychedelics were, of course, breath work doesn't fall into that category, but when something was demonized for so long and said, like, you know, and told to be like this thing that was going to damage you, and then all of a sudden the narrative changes so quick, what happens is a lot of people go in like gangbusters, like all in way too quickly, and they end up doing more harm than good. And it can happen with anything, right? But one of the things I'm curious for you is, you know, I'm fascinated by ayahuasca. It's one of the only medicines I've yet to sit with. And yet I have so many people in my network that have sat with it and have spoken to its incredible properties, and also how challenging it can be as well. You know, I'm curious for you, like, what is it about that medicine specifically that calls to you, right? That you've been able to, you know, find out as you journey with it. What do you think is different with that medicine than maybe other ones you've interacted with in the past?
Mm. So maybe I'll just share a little bit how I started the ayahuasca journey. I knew about the medicine for quite some time before I decided to actually dive in. I've had some of my friends do it for years. And so I was kind of, you know, from the sidelines, just finding out more information, getting acquainted about it. And really, there was, you know, the time came where it actually just said, I'm ready, you know, and I had questions, you know, I had a lot of questions. I wasn't, a lot of them had to do with spirituality, because I was kind of indoctrinated into these religions when I was a young kid, and something inside of me always felt that didn't feel right. I couldn't sit with it, and I had a lot of questions that I could not get answers to. It would just be like things that just didn't make sense. The answers did not make sense to me, and going into the work, I like I said, I had a lot of questions, and so as I started working with the medicine, I I, I was able to see. I started really working on those questions that I had. They started coming up, right, and they and I started noticing them as part of me. Are fearful, afraid of the unknown, and you know, I was kind of brought up as in a Christian. My mom was Christian. She became really religious towards her later years, and I was kind of always pulled into the church. And I would ask, you know, why do I do this? And it would be like, just do it, or I don't know, Ryan. I had a lot of resistance to it. I had so much resistance to it, and becoming free of those beliefs, those belief systems was probably the biggest work for me that I was able to work through on this medicine. And I say it because it took so many years to really become free from it, because I was noticing how it still had me, like how I would have to, like, how you would put a cross on yourself before you leave the house, or you won't be protected. Or if I took off my cross from my neck, I wouldn't be protected. It's like, to me, it was the same as having OCD. It was the same type of thing. I kept noticing these fears. If I didn't do that, then I wouldn't be. But it was that condition that kept existing in my mind, and it took, like I said, it took years to get fully off of it, from those fears, that those conditions that existed in my mind, that if I didn't do this, then I couldn't get to God. And the realization, right, that came through, that there can never be a separation between me and God. There can never be a layer that would have to do to get to God. And I still have a lot of friends who work with plant medicine longer than me, that are still dealing with this, or have went back to religion, which I cannot really understand fully. For me personally, it is hands down the biggest fear, the biggest programming that I had worked through in my life, is to become free of that, of that separation from God, and the realization that God is here, is always here, and God doesn't want anything from you. He doesn't want you to go to church to put a candle on. He doesn't want you to fast once a year for Him to love you. He's always there, and you don't need to go to the temple to be close to God. It is that you can say simple realization, but it took a lot of work to get there, and I'm so grateful to be free from that programming, because it limited me in so many ways, and I had so much fear, and I see people around me still dealing with that fear without even realizing, and they probably would never will. And I don't even know how to how to how to how to get there, besides jumping in and really facing those fears, and really asking, is that true? Is that really true? And no one will be able to answer those questions for you, but you. And ayahuasca is that medicine for me, that was able to allow me to work, created space where I could see those fears in that, and then I could work through them slowly over many years. And once I started making some headway, she started showing me the diagrams of how the structure of source, and everything below the source is just a layer, and if it's a layer, it was God, it was man-made. And if it's man-made, then it cannot be the source. The source is beyond any rational thought, any religion, any concept, any principle. It is untouchable, it is unspeakable. It is something that you can only feel deeply inside, and once you do, you know the truth. You don't need any more explanations. You don't need to prove it to anybody, that you're right, or this is how it is. This is just embedded in me for forever now. So grateful for that. It's the biggest one.
Hello, everybody. I hope you are all enjoying the show. I wanted to stop by and fill you in on our brand new, completely free to join Facebook community called the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle. Now, I imagine many of you are aware of the newest creation within Highly Optimized, which is the Connect with Cannabis 10-week coaching certification program. Alex and I have been having so much fun empowering coaches with the skill set of coaching with cannabis and helping them up-level their coaching practice that we wanted to create a place where anyone could join to ask questions, receive free information on how to work with cannabis in the way we teach in the program, and be able to gain clarity around how to get the best results with their clients in order to become financially independent in their coaching practice. To join, hop over to the link in our Instagram bio and send us a request. It is our intention to assist as many coaches, facilitators, and healers as possible in the important work they are doing in the world. And if you are looking to join a community of like-minded individuals just like you, who are passionate about helping their clients achieve the highest quality of life possible, the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle is for you. I am looking forward to speaking with all of you in the group, and as always, enjoy the show. You said so much amazing stuff in there, and the first thing being the indoctrination to religion, right? And I feel this is what a lot of people are getting challenged with these, materialistic religions where, God is separate, especially, these more like Abrahamic religions, like versions of Christianity, which are like, hey, God's a man in the sky and he's almost a demonic God, right? He's up there with a list. And if you don't get everything right, he's going to punish you forever. And, it creates a lot of this, what I feel most people are doing with religion and I won't say most people, what I feel some people are doing with religion are that they're doing things like going to church, praying, etc., to then have something like have a ritual, then to be someone who's a Christian, right? Versus the other way where you be a certain type of person, right? A spiritual person. And then you do in accordance with that being. So you do things that are in accordance with that yearning to be God, be any of these things, taking the personal power of like, hey, everything is God. And so therefore I am God. So I'm going to be that. And then my doings come from a deeper place, if you want to call it intuition, etc. And then those allow you to have things, right? Like have community, have a purpose, a job or like a way of being of service that fills you up. And so I feel a lot of people get it wrong with this do, have, be, instead of going from be, do to have, and I think that's one of the things that I was very fortunate where my parents, they never we'd talk about religion. They would tell me they were Protestant, but I could count on one hand the times I went to a church, and that includes like other people's weddings and baptizations and baptisms rather, and all those types of things. But the way that I thought about it growing up was I was like, hey, like I believe in something, right? But I just don't. I don't know why, but it's not this, right? It's not this whole church thing, right? It kind of just like it didn't sit right with me. And so that first time where I went deep on mushrooms when I was about 23 and I felt right? I felt like, whoa, okay, there was something bigger there. I knew immediately that whatever that was, it wasn't plant medicines that did that. They opened that up for me. I knew that right from that point. And then it was a long, arduous point until I actually started making the changes to be able to experience that in my life without having the addition of something like plant medicines. And now, I'm at a point now where, again, definitely not perfect, definitely still fall out of it, but I'm much better at being able to reach a very present state, which really, like when you think about plant medicines, they're connecting you to higher spiritual dimensions, which allow you to channel information from like versions of, if you follow the mystery school thing, like essentially each spiritual dimension is in a different density, right? And so this is what the pyramids were originally made for as well, according to theory, is that you would sit inside the pyramid and your blood, right, or water being the blood of the earth, and Matthias De Stefano talks about this a lot, would be able to channel through the mechanisms of the pyramid to higher dimensions. And you'd be able to bring back, different frequencies in your body and also different pieces of wisdom, etc. And this is what I see plant medicines doing, is they're connecting you to something farther out. The way he breaks it down is essentially that like the top level, like kind of like the God, is one beam of light, right? And then like a kaleidoscope, it breaks into 2, then 4, then 8, whatever. And every time it breaks, there's another like being at that level, right? Who's a God, right? You can call him an Elohim, as like a bunch of different, practices do. But like, there's different levels. There's different, the archangels are in the 7th dimension. I think the seraphim is the 9th dimension. He goes through all this stuff, but it made so much sense to me. I'm like, oh, interesting. So we're channeling wisdom and it like from these dimensions. And it kind of made perfect sense that monotheism and pantheism were perfectly right? Because it's like, yes, there is one God and everything is God, right? So it's like, everything can be God from one source. And so that was the first time when I learned all that and applied it to my plant medicine experiences, where I was like, oh, it actually makes perfect sense. Now, I don't know if that's actually correct, right? But for me, that's correct. And that's all that really matters at the end of the day, because we have 7.5 billion different realities. All it matters if it was real to you, it was real, right?
Yeah. Yeah. To go back to the religion, I was asking this. So there is like, Christians, right, believe in this is their God. And so you have the Muslims that believe that this is their God. And then you have the Jews, right? And they believe that their God is the best. So they all think that their God is the best, right? Their God is the best.
Yes.
But don't you guys see it, right? Where you're all on this on this layer, right? Where it just cannot be.
Yeah.
Because they believe the same thing like you do, the same way. They believe that their God is the best, and you believe that your God is the best. But that just can't be, because you're both stuck at this kind of mind layer, right? Believing that your God is the best. And I just, kept on kind of thinking that what's going on there, right? And that just raised a lot of questions. And like I said, God is unconditional. God is everywhere. You cannot get rid of God if you wanted to.
Yes. And it's funny too, because the paradox in that, like that you set up with like everyone thinking their God's the best, is what are they willing to do to prove that? They're willing to fight and kill people and die for it, right?
Yes.
And if you're quote unquote, if you're thinking that your God, quote unquote, is telling you that you need to fight and kill people to prove something, you're not actually experiencing what God really is, right? Because if you did, you'd be happy with, if someone wants to believe, like there's a hilarious religion called Pastafarianism, where they believe in this flying spaghetti monster. Now, if you were someone who had experienced God and you saw that, you'd high five him and go, hey, whatever gets you closer to that feeling, man, I want you to believe. If that's a flying spaghetti monster that gets you there, awesome, right? Because it doesn't matter. You are all on the same team, right? And what team is it? Team everything. Team literally every single thing in the universe, from the computer we're on to the bodies we incarnate in, to our animals, to our plants. Everything is alive. It's just what density is it at, what vibrational frequency and what vibrational energy is it at. And so it's so interesting, when that's like the first thing that shows me whether or not, and I don't position myself as someone who knows everything about this subject by any means, but something that's a red flag to me right off the bat is when someone's like, no, I know my God's the best, or I know this religion's the right way, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, you're missing the point, right? Like you were talking about, you're at that level still, right? You're still allowing too much of your reptilian brain, like the competitiveness, all of that, to be cast in your story as quote unquote religion. And it's not a football game, right? Like one person's team is not better than the other. Everyone has their own practice and their own way of reaching union with God, universe, source, whatever you call it. And none is better or worse than the other. It's just whatever works for you is the way you get there. That's why some people get there through ice baths. Some people get there through, cooking, right? And like, really being of service in that way. Some people get it from traveling. Some people get it from many different ways, but it's about figuring out what your preferred method of getting there is, and not falling so much into the dogma of like the people that essentially, stopped having direct experiences of God and started writing about it instead. Because that's essentially what any of these, Paul says a quote a lot, which is, if you need scripture, you're not enlightened. And if you're enlightened, you don't need scripture, right? Because what is it really? It's the experience of someone that had the direct experience of God. It's like the written down experience versus like you go interact with ayahuasca in the right set and setting with the right guide. You're going to get to have the direct experience of it, right? And then you can put your own words to it and figure out how you get there and everything, right? But it's great to want to learn these things. And I love reading religious texts, but I also know like, hey, this is just a text and a version of what this is from someone else's perception. Now let me go be my own scientist and try this out and see what it means for me in my own life. And I think that's one of the best things plant medicines have offered me, is the ability to have my own say in what I think this is, not because I want to be right, but just because I'm curious and We're all different expressions of the same unique source. And so what does this unique expression say? What does this unique expression say? You know, what is everyone's story about it? Because I learn from people, but I also want to test it on my own experience of life as well.
Yes, and it's impossible to explain God, but if I would try, I would say that God is oneness, right? God is God is love, and if you know God, if you know love, if you know compassion, you're not going to kill anybody. You're not going to hurt anybody over your God. So if you really know God, you're not going to use fear or aggression towards anybody to prove the righteousness of your God.
Yes, 100%. You know, it's so true. You know, and you know, one of the medicines that really allowed me to have that experience, and you know, one of the most intense experiences of my life too, is 5-MeO DMT. Have you sat with that medicine before, by chance?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, like that is, I mean, talk about like you come out of that and you're like, whoa, okay, well, this changes everything. Like the first time I came out of that, this is like, you know, again, people talk about killing the ego a lot. And I love my ego. I think the ego is amazing. It's just sometimes it's doing the best with the information it has, but it needs a software update. And so it was funny because you know, I did a lot of speaking with my ego before my first 5-MeO journey because I knew I'm like, this is going to be a very fast, right? Versus like mushrooms or even ayahuasca, where like, you know, you take it and then you're slowly waiting and then it's slowly coming on. And then it might hit you at a certain point, but it's like you go through what I call the werewolf stage, you know, of like going from sober state into altered state pretty slowly. Versus 5-MeO, you're there in 10 seconds, right? So it's an inhalation method. And so for me, I had this long conversation with my ego, like, hey, listen, this is going to be pretty quick. You just got to trust me on this. We're going to be fine. So I had the right person, you know, facilitating for me. I go out. I have this like puddle of goo experience where I literally just turn into a ball of love on the floor, basically. And what is love? It's God, right? So, you know, I come back in, and as soon as I'm like, you know what it's like, you know, as soon as you're coming down levels as you're reintegrating, like first you're like, you come down to like, oh, I actually have a mind again. Then you're like, oh, I'm starting to have thoughts. Oh, okay, I'm a person. Oh, my name is Ryan. Oh, I have legs and arms. Oh yeah, I'm alive. Oh, okay, I'm here. So it's like these slowly like reintegrating. And I remember as soon as my mind clicked on, the first thing my ego said was, I knew I had it right, right? Like that was the first thing that came to me. And it was so comical to me because it was for me proof that I had done a lot of work on my ego, because the ego, of course, is going to think, you know, that's what it does. It's competitive. It wants to do those things. But also the first thing it clicked on with was something that was like funny, right? It was like, I knew I had it right. And it was like, it made me giggle because, you know, normally if you have an experience like that, like I've had before, you know, you get clicked back in, your ego is like terrified. It's like absolutely like just having an ordeal rather than an experience. And it was funny when I came back in, that was the first thing. And it just made me laugh so hard because it was the perfect experience of like union with God, source, like all divinity, spirituality, whatever you want to call it. And then realizing how funny it is to be a human, where it's still like my ego is like, we had that figured out, you know, like it was so funny to me. And I'm curious if you've had anything like that when you experienced, or what your experience was like with it.
Oh, it was oneness, you know, it was infinity, pure love. No, just the feeling. I don't know if you could you can explain the feeling of infinity.
It's indescribable.
You cannot. It's indescribable. It's feeling just the source of endless love, and it was the most amazing experience of my life, hands down, for sure.
Yeah,
it is actually dying. It is knowing where you came from. It is knowing where you're going, and to coming back into this body, and to keep experiencing life in the physical plane, but also knowing who you really are. And I don't think you can ever forget after that experience who you really are once you experience that.
Yeah. If there's an argument for like, do we have a red pill in society? It's like, that is the red pill. Like any medicine can be seen as like, quote unquote, a red pill. But that one is kind of like, and I say this like not being serious, but it's almost like the businessman's red pill, right? Because technically you could do it and the experience could last as little as like 10, 15, 20 minutes, right? If you really were, pushing it, it's under an hour most of the time, unless you're going, multiple rounds in. But it's such an ample opportunity to have that red pill experience where like it's really hard to put Pandora back in the box after that. And, as I tuned into it, the closest I can describe to the feeling is, if anyone's listening, when you get the chills, right? Like when you get like a really good, like thing of the chills, if you could tune into like almost the reason, at least for me, that I think I like when we have the chills, we kind of like, whoa, we kind of move, is because it feels so good when you really think about it, that it's almost like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. Imagine that, but in every fiber of your being, but nonstop. Like it's literally like you don't know what to do with yourself. I mean, like you're expanding into infinity, yet you can still kind of feel your body, yet at a certain point you lose your body and you become everything, which is just that feeling of euphoria. But for the whole universe, you feel every heartbeat. You feel, I mean, it is 100% impossible to put in the words, yet I still like trying, because it's I did get so curious,
It's like a cosmic orgasm.
Dude, 100%. I could not have stated it any better.
It is a really beautiful experience. Yeah. And working with ayahuasca 12 years prior to that could not have prepared me. I mean, you never prepared for that experience. You just not. I couldn't in my wildest dreams imagine for it to be like that. Could not have. Even after all those ceremonies that I've done, it was magical.
Yeah, like it for me, it made MDMA look like child's play, right? Where like you think you feel good when you take MDMA. This was like, oh, you thought that felt good? Imagine a million X that. Like, and for anyone listening, I am not recommending, this is not medical advice. Don't take this as you need to do it. If it's right for you, it will call on you and you'll know when the right time is. It's just that I was, to use this term because it's not used enough, I was flabbergasted at how good it is. I mean, how good you can possibly feel while in the human body. And the great thing about that is that now I can think about that feeling. Now, again, I can never remember it the exact way I had it. It's kind of like a dream. And I imagine, you know what I mean? Where, you can know that you had the experience, but it's hard to like, of course, you can't just be like, I want to feel that feeling again and then feel it. But I can tune into like, the sensations I was feeling and things I do remember while I'm doing Tai Chi, while I'm meditating specifically. Like after a good 30 to 35 minutes meditating, especially if I'm laying down, I'll start to realize that I'm like becoming my surroundings. Like I'm almost like, instead of just being in my body, I'm like about 8 feet out on each side of me, right? Each angle of me. And I can feel like I'm holding more energy. And it's almost like my eyes, or like my being is not actually like confined to my body. It's more of just like a set of eyes roaming around the universe. And it's very interesting because, what I've started to realize is like, okay, there's some connection there between, and of course, like this makes sense, but there's some connection between what you feel, especially with the 5-MeO, where like you become everything, and then meditating. And it's really allowed me to have some like, parameters of how to understand what monks mean when they say like you can get there meditating, right? I'm like, no, I could definitely see that. It would take a lot of devotion and dedication. And I imagine like becoming a monk, you'd have to literally do that, like subtract from the equation of your life so much that you literally are just like, you're living in the mountains. You don't have any, like possessions, nothing like that. But I imagine you could get there, because I've had some experiences meditating where, especially when I'm at acupuncture, where I'll have like split seconds where I enter that samadhi where I'm like, whoa, I'm everything. Oh shit, what happened? My mind clicked on, I'm back in reality. And so it's such an interesting mystery. And, I love exploring it and, realizing that we can get a lot of these results through things like breath work, through a good cold exposure, through meditation has been so empowering. And what's allowed me to, not fall into the habit of just like needing the next experience over and over, which happens a lot in the psychedelic communities these days, is people are doing way too much, way too often, and they're having some challenges come up as a result. So I think it's really powerful that, we focus on, also stating that you can get there through other means as well,
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. We can get there through meditation and through breath work, but we also need to remind or remember that we're living in these interesting times right now, and coming from all these different places, and it's not for everybody for sure. And I know some people who have had traumatic experiences on this medicine, they weren't ready. But for some people, it is something that is necessary to really lift those layers, peel the onion, where you've been like so programmed. And I'm talking about myself, where for me, working with this medicine has been really beneficial, and I needed it. And maybe I could have gotten there through meditation and through yoga, and I don't know how long that would take, right? So it definitely speeded up the process, and I needed that oomph, right? And then it has to call you, and every single person has to feel it out for themselves. It's a unique decision, and don't rush into it. Take it slow, and be safe, right?
Yeah.
Be safe. Always know who you're going to trust to do this, any types of medicine with. Find out if where that person's intentions are, where his heart is. It's a very important part who you decide to do this deep work with. Yes.
Yeah, that's a really powerful and potent piece of advice too, because one of the other things that I've noticed plays into people's challenging experiences ending up bad experiences is an untrained shaman, untrained facilitator that's maybe has the right intentions of like, hey, I really want to help, but they don't have enough awareness on like, what if this person goes out too far? How do I pull them back in? What if they have an entity attachment that happens, right? There's a lot that can happen that again, in the modern day, it's really, of course not on this show, because everyone that's listening to this obviously knows what they're bargaining for, but it's really hard to talk about things like entity attachment and like opening yourself up in terms of your chakra system and stuff, because a lot of the people in the modern day are like, you can't prove that, right? And it's like, well, I've had some experiences, and I know who I trust in terms of like people like CHEK and everyone like this, and of course like the mystery school lineages and everything, where they talk about like, hey, you are opening yourself up to a lot of possibilities. And in that almost infinite realm of possibilities are some challenges that you really don't want to experience if you don't have to, if it's not part of your karma. And so, yeah, one of the most powerful things I always tell people is like, if you're really thinking about, especially sitting with a medicine like ayahuasca and going in, it's like, do your research, right? Find someone who's literally like, their life is about this, and they're vetted, they have experience, and they kind of know how to dance in these waters, because it's an art form, right? And not everyone's meant to be a shaman. And I think a lot of people, they have the best of intentions, but they really don't know what they're opening up. And I think that can be a big challenge as well.
Yes, Ryan, I totally agree. This is a very important information. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And man, dude, we already crushed an hour, man. This flew by. I've been absolutely loving this, man. And I want to make sure I give you some time to drop where people can find you, where they can connect deeper with you, where they can experience the art forms of breath and cold exposure with you. Take it away, man. Tell people where they can connect with you.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. You guys can find me on Instagram. That's openmind_inc. I have a website, evolvewithyuri.com. And I also have a Wim Hof Method profile, which is wimhofmethod.com/instructors/Yury Opendik, my name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And my last question for you, Yuri, is this. If someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what is the one piece of advice that you would offer them to allow them to have the smoothest experience possible?
Know your why. Know your why. Know why you're going there. What's your intention?
Yes, absolutely. Intention is literally everything. As I've come to, find it out these days, like I put intention on everything. When I eat food, I'm just like, this is going to nourish me. I thank the plants and animals. And, again, for those science brains, correlation doesn't equal causation. But I will say that I feel a hell of a lot better and more connected to the world around me than I did before. And with plant medicines, again, it can be one of the best places to explore these concepts like intention, because you can actually feel the effects of it. rather than when you're in a sober state and you're putting it on, water or something like that. It can be a little harder to break through those old patterns. But when you're interacting with medicines, you can feel the effects of intention. So I love that piece of advice.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, guys. I believe it's fair to say that ride was well worth the price of admission, huh? One of the aspects of Yuri I love most is his ability to embody the work he serves the world with. And as they say, the proof is in the pudding. His ability to speak to the topics of plant medicines, his challenges within them, and see them as happening for him rather than to him, is proof that he has not only a deep understanding and knowledge base surrounding self-mastery, but that he does, in fact, embody it in his day-to-day life. Yuri is a living example of the notion that our entire lives, from our important work to our relationships, plant medicine experiences, and more, are created not by our external circumstances, but rather by how we choose to perceive those circumstances from within. If you felt your battery be charged by Yuri during the show and are eager to learn from one of the wisest individuals I have come across in my journey, then make sure you give him a follow and stay up to date on all the amazing workshops he is offering across the country at large. Make today the day you devote yourself to your potential and take action on the experience of life you know is waiting for you on the other side of your current perceived challenges. Yuri, thank you from the bottom of my heart for acting as a unit of love in my life, for being a bright light for others to learn and grow from, and for taking this trip down the rabbit hole with the listeners and I today. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.
Aho, brother. Thank you so much. I had so much fun sharing with you and connecting. I appreciate you having me on your show. So much love. Thank you, Ryan.